Ya, going live. Kemudian karena sudah jam, mungkin saya mulai saja ya. Webinar kali ini mohon maaf dulu, saya harus ya, going live. Kemudian maaf Bapak Ibu karena handle sendiri. Ini saya stop sharing. Kemudian video. Baik Bapak Ibu, terima kasih banyak atas waktu dan kesempatan yang diberikan kali ini, dan terima kasih juga sudah bersedia hadir di acara sharing session dari program studi sastra Inggris Universitas Udayana. Jadi sebenarnya setelah ini adalah dua kata kata dari Koprodi untuk membuka kegiatan kali ini sebelum kita mulai. Mungkin untuk tidak terlalu lama menunggu waktu, saya akan buka terlebih dahulu bahwa ini adalah kegiatan pertama dari program studi sastra Inggris untuk sharing session seperti ini, dan kami berharap untuk melakukan hal yang sama juga ke depannya. Jadi kalau Bapak Ibu ada saran ataupun ide-ide terkait topik-topik yang ingin kita adakan nantinya, silakan tuliskan di kolom chat untuk pertemuan kali ini. Ya Pak Koprodi yang berusaha join dari Tabanan.
Is he trying to connect or?
Gimana Pak?
Apakah Pak Kaprodi sedang dalam perjalanan atau bagaimana? Mencoba connect atau bagaimana? Otherwise you just start or you open it on behalf of the Kaprodi.
Ya, baik. Jadi atas nama Bapak Koprodi Sastra Inggris, saya akan mulai acara kali ini. Pembicara pertama kita adalah Bapak Wayan Arka yang merupakan Associate Professor di ANU, Australian National University, dan juga dosen di program studi kami di Sastra Inggris. Dan Bapak Wayan Arka akan berbagi hasil penelitiannya yang berharap mendapatkan masukan dan feedback komentar dari Bapak Ibu sekalian. Jadi kemudian dua hal yang ingin saya tekankan sekali lagi adalah saya akan membagikan link untuk absensi yang nantinya akan memberikan Bapak Ibu sertifikat partisipasi kegiatan ini. Dan sesi diskusi bisa dimulai setelah mungkin 45 menit berjalan, dan Bapak Ibu bisa mulai nanti di tengah-tengah bertanya melalui chat, dan saya akan pantau chatnya, dan Bapak Arka nanti bisa menjawab setelah Bapak selesai melakukan presentasi. Oke, ya, saya pikir sekian, Pak. Mungkin Bapak bisa mulai.
Okay, I will share my screen. Let me see. So everybody can see it?
Good. Bisa,
yes.
Pak?
Okay, good. Okay, terima kasih. Thank you for attending my talk. I'm very keen to get feedback from all of you because I'm going to talk about two things actually. One is the linguistic side of commutative-inclusory expressions about nama, structure of the expressions, and the other half is the socio-pragmatics of these expressions. So this is something that something that I'm very keen to do, and I've been working on this, and I hope that I can get more feedback from you. So let me start with the basic idea. I have so many slides, so I'll skip certain part of the talk, in particular complex data sets from Papuan languages like Maori. I think what I want to do within, let's say, around 50 minutes or so to go through different data points and just keeping certain details, but telling you the basic ideas of the issues, the points, and what I'm up to at the moment. And then we conclude with the points and future research that I'm thinking to do. Okay. So the basic idea is we look at the plurality, talking about number, and part of that is the idea of commutative-inclusory meaning expressed in linguistics by commutative constructions. So the general idea is the meaning of togetherness. Okay. This kind of meaning is not only linguistically important in terms of the typology. People are interested in how community is expressed across languages. In particular, in my case here, looking at how that meaning is expressed in the Austronesian and Papuan languages of Indonesia. But also, I think the idea of togetherness is highly valued cross-culturally. This is an area that is still understudied currently, and I think I'm thinking of doing more research on this. So just to give you an idea of how this togetherness meaning is important, so we see I just start with the social, political, cultural aspect of this one. So in Indonesia, for example, we have been talking a lot about Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, for example, unity in diversity, right? So people talk about this idea of we are stronger when we are together, all right? We are always better together. So we know about this being, together is culturally highly valued. It's very important. And also, you might know this person. This is Richard Branson, the owner of Virgin. This big company airline now. Even though we know now after COVID-19, every airline is in trouble now. But this person is, so I just want to provide a quote here. Togetherness is a hugely important aspect of life. Okay, it unites us. It gives us security, much needed support, and sense of belonging. So this is a very important point of sense of belonging. It encourages us to love one another. Okay, being in one group, you feel part of the group. So this is the cultural aspect, and which is very important, not only traditionally, but also in modern life, like in a company, for example. Okay. So, I just give you, the broad idea that what I'm going to talk about. Part one, I'm going to talk about microsystem. So we look at linguistic system internally. So people talk about microsystem, formal expressions of aspect of plurality and commutative. Okay, so here I will look in particular about number system. People talk about number system. So we start with the difference between English, for example. I think because we all know about English, the number system in English, and I'll start there and look at the differences between English number system and how plurality is expressed in Indonesian languages. All right, and then I'll show you empirical evidence from languages that I'm working on recently, but I don't think I have time to go through the details, but perhaps we just look at the language that we are familiar with, in particular Indonesian, to get the basic idea what I'm talking about. Okay. And then the second part, I will, as I mentioned earlier, I will look at the macro system. So how that meaning is expressed and not only expressed, but it's used in a broader context in communication. We talk about the pragmatics, the usage, but then still looking at the linguistic constraint and how that concept of togetherness expressed in that intercultural or intergroup communication. All right. So I'm going to mention several languages. So Balinese, Ronga is a language that I've been working on. This is a language in Central Flores. So I'm working on Maori. Also, Maori is a minority and highly endangered language in in Merauke. And Woi is a language in Yapen area. Now is a language on Nau Island close to Rote. There are other languages, actually, I have the data from, but I don't think I have time to go through them. Okay. So let's go to the basic idea, the basic data of plurality and semantics of nama. Okay, before we come to the meaning of commutative-inclusory meaning and why they are of special interest. Okay. So when we talk about number, we talk about singular, dual, plural, and you have to know that number is a referential feature. A referential feature means that it refers to a particular entity. Okay, so entities. When we talk about number, now we talk about basically nominal number. That is to say, number associated with entities. Because if you read in the literature, there is, there's the so-called verbal number, the number about events. The events can be quantified as well. We'll talk more about that in a moment because they are interconnected. So the nominal number, the number expressing plurality about the entities, and the number expressing plurality about the events are interconnected, as we shall see. So let's start with the basic idea when we talk about the English, okay? Semantic number, the meaning of number. When you talk about number, you talk about pluralities of entities, talk about 1, 2, 3, okay? So one of the important typology, how number is expressed across languages, we talk about general number, okay? Which is different from the one that we have in English. English does not have, the type of the number in English is not general number because you see, for example, when we talk about pumpkin, cat, you have the morphology on the noun has the paradigm, okay? The paradigmatic forms of nouns in English, cat, cats, for example. You have the plural or positional in the forms between singular and plural expressed in the morphology. But that is not the case in Indonesian. Indonesian, you have kucing, for example. The form kucing can be used to express singular plural, okay? So this is general number. So the number, the form, the nouns in Indonesian and also in many other languages in Indonesia do not have morphological marking to express number. Such nouns are called general number, okay? The nouns having general number. Now, when we talk about plural, the meaning of plural in language like English, you have singular plural opposition, but in many other languages, the value of number could be more than simply singular and plural. You can have dual, for example, okay, depending on the language. Now, another important distinction in the type of plurality is the so-called homogeneous plural. Okay, so you talk about homogeneous plural when you talk about multiple entities like pumpkins or cats. When you talk about cats, you have a group of cats. Okay, plurality of cats, entities of the same type. Okay, but then there is another kind of plurality when you talk about the so-called heterogeneous plurality. Okay, so when you talk about we in English or kita or kami in Indonesian, you talk about different kinds of plurality, different from the homogeneous plural. Because when we talk about kami or kita, you talk about a set of people, different people, speaker, addressee, or some other people. Okay, when you talk about kami. All right, so this is heterogeneous plural. It is in this case that we talk about commutative, inclusory, or associative constructions. Because when you talk about kami, you may be present in a particular conversation, only you as the speaker, but you can also say kami, meaning that I and my associates. All right. So you talk about commutative, inclusory. So there are people included when you talk about kami, excluding, for example, your addressee. That's when you talk about exclusive, kami. Or you talk about kita, meaning that I and you and perhaps other people. Okay, so this is the basic idea. So you have the difference between heterogeneous plural and homogeneous plural. That's a very basic distinction in number system across languages, and the way they are expressed also, they are different. Okay, now in relation to the difference between these different kinds of plural, and we also know that languages have different ways of how number is organized in their grammar. Okay, so in English we talk about morphosyntactic number. That is to say, the number is highly grammaticalized. So you have agreement, the so-called morphosyntactic agreement in English. So Bill is working with his wife. Even though the people here, you have plural, Bill and his wife. So the event of working, you have two people, but then, because of the highly grammaticalized, you talk about morphosyntactic agreement. Bill is, you cannot say Bill are, okay? Because, the subject is singular, even though the participant is working are plural. Okay, this is called morphosyntactic number agreement, okay? But that is not the case when you talk about morphosemantic number. Okay, a language like Maori that I'm working on now, so you have morphosemantic. This is quite different. Okay, so you talk about I'm sitting with Marcus. So in English, you have the verb subject agreement with singular here, but in Maori you have dual here because you are sitting. The event of sitting, involves two people. Okay, so the verb comes with the dual morphology. Okay, even though here you have a commutative constructions, a postpositional or PP expression, the commutative role is expressed by a PP, but then the verb should be dual. You cannot have a singular like in English here. Okay, so if you put na, kuya, do, for example, do is the singular agreement, it's not grammatical. Okay, so you have a morphosemantic system of number in this language, which is quite different from the one in English. In English, you have morphosyntactic number agreement. Okay, you have singular agreement, even though the plurality of the participants here, you have plural, not singular. Okay, in both cases. So that's very important. Okay. Basic idea of commutative now. So commutative, when you talk about commutative or associative or inclusory, you talk about plurality, about participants or events, entities that consist of more than one person. And then you have this relationship. You talk about a company A and about companion and also the group. Okay, so you talk about plural, but you may mention only one element of that. And then that's why we talk about commutative, for example, when A and C, the companion is mentioned. For example, like Indonesia, saya bekerja dengan Ali, or saya makan dengan Ali, and saya and Ali, saya is the company and C is the Ali, but the two form a group. Okay. So in English, as I mentioned earlier, we have the Bill is working with his wife, and then you have this, you have commutative. Okay, Bill and his wife. This is the C, the group here, but then you do not have the inclusory. Okay, but There are also senses associated with that. You have this accompaniment, togetherness, proximity, co-participation, for example. These are the senses relevant for the meaning of commutative. And we shall see in a moment, these are culturally, politically very important. Okay. So as I mentioned, so in Marori, this is Marori language, you have singular, it looks like singular agreement like in English, but it turned out it's not, okay? Because as I mentioned, you have the jewel here when the, when the participant, the post PP is also taken into account with the plurality, the jewel here, okay? So you can say something like this, na kuyeden in Marori, meaning that you have dual on the verb. It's not an agreement here because you have singular here and then you have dual here. It's not an agreement like in English, but it's perfectly acceptable in this language. But it means that I and somebody else, just another person, you see in Indonesian, you say kami berdua duduk, okay, even though you mention saya, okay, here, okay. That's the basic idea, okay. So and why commutative? That kind of meaning and expressions are important in linguistics, okay. Because, as I mentioned, it makes use of different grammatical resources. Different languages make use of different resources associated with plural meaning. Number, plurality, categories are linguistically important, but also, as we shall see later, culturally also very important. Posing the relationship between expression, linguistic expression, and the meaning, and how that pairing of meaning is used in intercultural or intergroup communication is also another aspect that is very important. Okay, so the senses like togetherness, proximity, co-participation. So those senses are not only linguistically important, but also socio-culturally for communicative, reasons. Okay, and also as we shall see for political reasons. Okay. What I want to do is briefly go through the uh, the implication of morphosyntactic number. Just forget about the morphosyntactic number because here we are talking about Indonesian languages. We look at the morphosemantic number. So what does it mean a language having morphosyntactic number? What does it mean? So we look at, as we already mentioned, in those languages like Indonesian, Balinese, and Marori, and many other, and I think most of the languages in Indonesia have, the no expression on the number, no expression of number in the nouns. Okay. So we look at three lines of implications. One is what does it mean to have a lack of morphological number noun, and also looking at the implication on the so-called indexing, something similar like agreement. Okay, so these are just summary of the points. So we have, in terms of number system, languages like Balinese, different from Woi and now. So I identify at least 4 types of languages across Indonesia. So Balinese, Indonesian, and Marori belong to type 1. Okay, and then Woi belong to type 2 and Dao. So those languages, Indonesian languages, are different from English, type 5. So in terms of the number system, we know that they are morphosemantic, whereas English more syntactic. And then we talk about common nouns having general number in those languages, whereas English, you have a specific number. Okay. In terms of marking of commutative, you have dependent marking like dengan, for example, in Indonesia, or ajak in Balinese. Okay. So you have dependent marking, which are, you see common across different types of languages. But there are also differences in terms of whether inclusory meaning, the meaning like we or kita, included in the verb, for example, there are markers for that. So those languages like Balinese or Indonesian or Woi, they do have that kind of marking, but not languages like Ronga, for example. Ronga is an isolating language, so it doesn't have any morphology. So it does, at least, it doesn't have that one. Okay, and also whether you have the implicit associative. And the last one, I think this is important when you look at the differences between Indonesian type languages and English. Okay, you have syntactic agreement here, but Indonesian and other languages like Maori, you have semantic kind of agreement. Well, not really agreement. If you see in that, it depends on your notion of agreement anyway. So we look at that and see through the differences. Okay. So I just want to look at Indonesian perhaps because most of you are from Indonesia rather than from Bali. Just want to make sure that we get the meaning. So let's look at Indonesian, just keeping the Balinese example because I have other things to say. Okay. So let's look at Indonesian. Okay. So inclusivity, so included the meaning that you belong to a group or not is expressed in Indonesian by, for example, pronominal. In the pronominal, we have kami or kita. Okay. So you can say saya datang dengan Amir. Dengan Amir is the commutative expressions. Okay, this is the commutative one. Okay, so saya is the speaker, and dengan Amir is the companion, and then you have an event of coming together, but there is no marker for the togetherness here. You just have the A and C here. Okay, so this is A, the company, the companion. Okay, but when you have kami datang, this is a bit complex in terms of the meaning. Okay, even though you say that kami, okay, inclusory, including saya dan orang lain, okay, but excluding you, exclusive here. But the meaning is rather complex. Okay, you can have kami datang, meaning that you have the speaker and other, the associate coming together, simultaneous events, okay, which is commutative, and associative, meaning that kami and I and my associates, came together. Okay. But it could also mean that there is no commutative meaning here, meaning that kami datang means that I came and then my associate came a bit later, not really together. Okay, there is no together meaning. To get commutative is not there. Okay, so you see the meaning could be very complex depending on the way it's expressed. Okay, it could be ambiguous. Okay, but when you have kami datang dengan Amir, it could mean different ways. You can have it, kami datang dengan Amir, but it could mean only one. Sorry, commutative and associative. Okay. All right. This would mean dengan is commutative meaning that dengan Amir is at the same time together with the speaker. Okay. It cannot mean kami datang dengan Amir to mean that Amir came on a separate occasion. It cannot mean that way. Okay. So that's the commutative expressed by a pronoun. But remember that plurality of entities can also express not necessarily by nominal. When we talk about nominal number, we talk about nouns expressing plurality, but plurality of entities could be also expressed by non-nominal category like verbs. Okay, when you say John datang berlima, meaning that John and his associate together, consisting of 5 people, including John, okay, came. Okay, so you have commutative, associative, inclusory meaning, but the meaning of the plurality is expressed by the ber, okay, berlima and also lima. Okay, so you have the middle. This is called middle prefix. Expressing that plurality of events, including the participants. All right. And then also you can have okay, beran. Mereka berdatangan. It has a complex commutative meaning. If you wanna have, if you wanna express the meaning is quite complex. Mereka berdatangan, meaning that they in big number came or arrived in group with their associates more or less around the same time. All right, that meaning is very complex. Beran. Okay, so you have this commutative togetherness meaning, but also simultaneous meaning, and the manner of coming also part of it. Berdatangan around the same time. Okay, even though not exactly in group at once, but it could possibly. But the point is that the plurality of events also include the plurality of participants. Okay, you cannot say dia berdatangan. Okay, because that conflicts this. Dia carries a singular meaning. Berdatangan imposes plurality of events, including plurality of participants, and you cannot say that in one sentence because that the meaning, the number meaning from coming from the subject and the verb, is in conflict. So you cannot say that. All right. In Balinese, you have also morphologies showing this complex meaning, like pakeber. The prefix pa, kedise pakeber in Bali, pa is a plurational meaning, plurationality, meaning that the morphology that expresses plurality of events, which also encodes plurality of the participants. All right. So when you say in Balinese kedise pakeber means that you have more than one bird flying more or less simultaneously. So you have the plurality of events, also the plurality of the participants, and you have this commutative meaning too. So together, hovering together, that kind of meaning. Okay, but another prefix like makaber, kedise makaber, it doesn't get that meaning. Okay, you have a different kinds of meaning expressed in morphology. So the point is, plurality of participants, when you talk about entities, we talk about number associated with nouns, nominals, but plurality of participants not necessarily expressed by the number on the nouns. Because nouns in Balinese and many other Indonesian languages do not carry number marking. So they are general number. So nouns are having general number, but the plurality of nouns entities may be encoded by other categories like the verbs, but then the plurality also carries extra meanings like commutative, manner. You have this kind of complex meaning associated with the predicate. Okay. I don't want to skip this one in the interest of time. So that's the first implication. So the implication that I just talked about is that in terms of morphology and languages in Indonesia, Indonesian languages do not have morphological marking for that number. So what that means is that the plurality is expressed by non-nominal categories like on verbs, for example, or on the prepositional phrases. On the verbs, you can have morphology like ber, middle voice in Indonesian, or pa, for example, in Balinese. Okay, so that's what you expected. That's the first implication. The second implication is now I just want to go through is the nature of indexing. Indexing is in a way like agreement in English, but this is more of the semantics, or perhaps it has also the pragmatics flavor. Okay, so the point is this is from Marori. You have this post-probable postpositional Marcos V, for example, but again, the dual number here agrees not only with this one, but also with the PP here. Okay, and you can have, as I mentioned, you have dual with the singular subject, and it doesn't. It's okay because you do not talk about agreement here. Okay, because the subject indexes. Index means you have this reference to the outside world. Okay, so the singular subject as a singular number, it indexes a singular reference to the world. and the verb carries a person dual here. It indexes dual number. The combination here, it's okay, but it means quite different. So you can say saya singular and then sit dual, meaning that I am sitting here. I sit here with another person. We two, okay, because you have dual morphology in the verb. Okay, so that's the impact, the implication when you have morphosemantic number. In English, you cannot have that because you have morphosyntactic. There is a strict grammatical agreement between subject and verb. But that is not the case in languages like Marori or other Indonesian languages. Woi is also similar to Marori, but Woi is an Austronesian language in Yapen Island. But what happened here is slightly different from Marori in that even though it's possible to have a commutative expression separate after the verbs, like in Marori or like in Indonesian, like dengan, but what happens here is the subject, you can have singular like any, for example, any and I are. So any singular and then you have index on the verb dual, it's okay. And then it means that any and somebody and I, okay. And also you have singular here and then you have singular on the verb. But also you have singular here. But the problem here, well, not really the problem, the pattern is slightly different from Marori in that the number associated with the committed here is not counted in the indexing of the verb. Okay, remember in Marori you have dual, you should have dual here because you have two participants. Even though you have two participants, but you still have singular here. In a way, it shows agreement, but this is not nearly agreement because here you have first singular, first person, but here you have third person. There's no, in a way, it's not really agreement, but you have this semantic indexing on the verb. Okay, so that's the basic idea. So what happened now in Woi, you can have dual here, and then so long that you have dual here, it's okay. But if you have dual here, you cannot have singular here. Okay, this is interesting in a way. Okay, so that's in Hawaii, and Ndau is the language in Ndau Island. So it's like Woi showing that kind of indexing, but you can have but the indexing on the verb does not take into account the PP after the verb. It's unlike in Marori. Okay, so you cannot have plural here and then you have singular here. Okay, that's the basic idea. So what I want to do now is just briefly going through isolating languages of Flores. You know, in isolating languages of Flores, because you do not have any morphology, you do not have any indexing on the verb. So that's very simple. There is no inclusory construction in Flores languages, and even though you do have commutative expressions. Okay. Just I want to very quick on this. I may just skip the constructed number. I just want to give you a flavor. What does it mean? What it means here. The constructed number means the idea is if it is not constructed, so the idea is, a singular morphology expresses singular number, a plural morphology expresses plural number, okay? Or dual morphology expresses dual number. So that is not constructed because you have overt expression of morphological number. All right. But what is important is in languages like Marori, you can have a number category, the meaning like dual, which is expressed by construction. The idea is you construct dual without dual morphology. Okay. So for example, so in B, we too are small. All right. You do not have any dual morphology saying two here, but what you do have, you have the subject we here non-singular, and then you have a verb having non-plural. So the combination of non-singular and non-plural construct dual. Okay, that's the basic idea. So you do not have dual morphology to express dual number, but what you do have, you have non-dual morphology, but construct that meaning. Okay, that's the idea of constructed number. But that is only possible in languages that have morphosemantic number. Remember that when you have morphosyntactic number, like in English, you have to have an agreement, morphosyntactic agreement between the subject. If the subject is singular, singular morphology, the verb has singular morphology. So you have agreement, and you talk about syntactic agreement. All right, but you cannot have, it doesn't make sense when you talk about syntactic agreement when you do not have number, morphological number expressing the same number category. Okay, but if in languages like Marori, when you do have the semantic morphosemantic number category, it's natural. That's what you expect. The language is making use of resources, of morphological resources, rich morphological resources, to express number, to express meaning. All right. You have that one. Okay. So you can express dual without dual morphology. That is what is expected. Okay. Because of this morphosemantic number. Okay. So, what is happening in my freezing? Hello. Good day. It's, I have a problem with moving on. Did you do something?
No?
What happened? I couldn't move my slide.
Mm,
Okay.
maybe you could close that first
And reload it.
yep, that would be okay.
Okay. Okay.
Bisa Pak ditutup?
Even my computer is freezing,
Oh, sebentar.
frozen now. What should I do?
Tunggu dulu Pak.
This is the korban teknologi ya.
Ya, sebentar. Tidak ada kenapa loh tadi.
Huh?
Saya tidak ada kenapa.
I click somebody who is trying to connect to join, and then after then I have the problem. So what should I do?
Maybe mungkin orang itu dia mau annotate ya PowerPoint Pak. Terus Pak okein. Oh itu sudah nyala Pak kayaknya. Nah, itu sudah on lagi.
Okay, is it? I wanna stop sharing and then return. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay, stop sharing. Okay, what happened here? Okay, I wanna join again. Is that okay?
Ya, di share ulang aja Pak. Share ulang.
Okay, share ulang ya. Okay, good.
Yep.
Thank you. Technology. All right. Okay. For some reason, you're all right. Okay. So I'm talking about dual number. What is expected in morphosemantic number? Okay. I think I'll just move to the summary before I move to the second part. The second part, I think, is more interesting rather than the first part. The first part is really a formal linguistic, the discussion and the point is quite complex. I just want to be quick on that. Okay, so the summary. So we have number system in Indonesian languages that is morphosemantic in nature. Can you turn off the mute? That's quite annoying.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have the semantic number in Indonesian languages where there's no number marking on nouns. Okay. So you have the implication on that in which you have different kinds of agreement, indexing, and in terms of the how plurality is expressed in those languages. Okay, and we see it's not simply expressing quantity, but also complex manner, how you do things together simultaneously, for example. Okay, so you have quite complex meaning. Okay, so this is something that expected on the basis of the different kinds of number system in languages. That is basically morphosemantic. Okay, okay, good. So that's the first part. So we look at the different ways how the grammars of those languages encode plurality and number, the meaning of associated with groups togetherness. Okay, now I just want to move to a more interesting and understudied aspect of number. Okay, that is the socio-cultural political dimension of linguistic togetherness. Okay, so before I go through the points, I just want to remind you about the basic idea in linguistics that we talk about forms and meaning. Okay, this is a very basic idea, I think, from the Saussure's earlier, know about, we learned a lot from the last century's idea of forms meaning. So in terms of the forms, we talk about morphology, syntax traditionally. Okay, in morphology, you talk about words consisting of roots and affixes. So I'm assuming a traditionally morpheme-based analysis here. And then we talk about syntax, but now we know that you have the combination of syntax, morphology, a bit here, and then we talk about constructions. It's kind of broader idea, kind of combining the whole thing in at the level of constructions. Okay, and then at the level of meaning, you have meaning and functions. Okay, meaning could be of different kinds, as we know. We know, for example, lexical meaning associated with words, and also grammatical meaning associated with the bits formative in morphology and syntax. We talk about grammatical meaning, okay? But we also talk about socio-cultural, political, or symbolic meaning in a larger space of meaning, all right? And then early on, I talk about this togetherness in terms of this iconic kind of a schema in a way. We talk about the accompany, companion, and group, and about plurality. And at the first part, I talk about how those elements, the meanings expressed in the lexicon, lexically by the verb, and also grammatically by the morphology. We talk about different sort of formative. Okay, but now I want to touch the socio-cultural symbolic meaning. Okay, when we talk about this, we talk about the larger context, where the syntax of commutative, part of the sentence being used in communication. Okay, when you use a communication, you talk about communication across people or across group of people, intercultural, intergroup communication. Okay. So it's very important and see here. And I just want to repeat again, so the idea when we talk about this, we talk about human beings, human as participants in a particular group. Togetherness is hugely a very important aspect of life. All right. And we talked about this earlier on in a larger context of Indonesian politics, for example. We talk about bersatu kita teguh, bercerai kita runtuh. So the idea of being together is powerful. Okay, negeri kompak. Okay, kompak means you go together on the same page towards the same direction, and it could be very powerful. Okay, and also across languages and cultures in Indonesia. I've been around from the west to the east in Indonesia. So working, for example, in the Merauke in Papuan languages, we also see how similar expressions, something similar like the Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, Isakot Beka, Isakot Kai in Marine. This is well known. If you go to Merauke, you see everywhere, this on the building and also part of the Merauke, the logo in Merauke. So the idea is basically still associated with a group, being together as a group and elements that's connected and part of this semangat kebersamaan, okay, bersatu dalam perbedaan, berbeda dalam kesatuan. All right. So you see the broader context of commutative meaning. Okay, we talk about gotong royong traditionally across ethnic groups. In Indonesia, highly valued because we know that being together, you can have together we can make a massive breakthrough. Okay, as a teamwork, you can break into something that you might not be able to be done individually. Okay, it's very important, powerful message being together. Okay, so we see that. So what I did, I did a preliminary study on this, looking at the corpus of Indonesian. Just look at Indonesian and look at the social dimension of commutative expression. Looking at the collocational analysis, this is something that Gede and I have been doing recently. So thanks to Gede helping with the extraction for from the corpus, looking at the statistics, the finding is quite intriguing. Okay? Intriguing because so I look at the corpus that Gede owns, so asking Gede to extract the word like ajak. Okay, ajak in Indonesian is part of this commutative. So you ajak, mengajak, okay, diajak. So you invite people to be part of you and see what the collocation of the word. Okay, I look at the top 30 right collocates. Okay, and the finding is it's very interesting. So you have three categories. The first one is the the physical togetherness. Physical togetherness. Something like, for example, diajak sama meaning, whatever, sama is the preposition sama, bapak, sama ibu. So being together physically, okay, physical togetherness. You have diajak pergi, diajak bekerja, diajak makan, diajak kerjasama, diajak berkencan, diajak nonton. So you have this collocates, associative, collocational, between words, and at the level it's highly significant. Okay, you have the top one, almost half. Okay, 51% is about physical togetherness, indicating that we talk about human togetherness, social togetherness physically. All right. The second place for this is verbal engagement. Okay, verbal engagement, something diajak berbicara, diajak ngobrol, diajak berdiskusi, diajak berbincang. So we talk a lot about being together when you ask people, or diajak berdiskusi, diajak ngobrol. So if you are part of the group, socially intimate, then you are diajak ngobrol. Okay, if you are not, and then you are ngobrol, tidak diajak. Okay, I mean, it's just interesting. So you have this social meaning associated with commutative, being part of the group, in group, being together. Well, you sense of belonging here. Okay. And then the third part is still associated with the first two, actually. It's psychological togetherness. Okay. So diajak mengenal, diajak menyelami, diajak memahami. So it's part of this, the states of partnership. Okay, so if you look in the literature about how language and psycholinguistics, so this is about positive psychology being part of the group. Okay, being together. It's how language, human experience, health and well-being. So being together, human is a social being. You be part of your group. Okay, and language plays a key role in that. It has resources by which you invite people part of you, social inclusion. But on the same time, language is also a powerful tool used to exclude people. Okay, social exclusion is the opposite thing. At the moment, I'm just talking about social inclusion. So how language is part of human experience, you encode your experience for
Di,
the human being. Okay,
Pak,
so that's a
uh,
very intriguing finding from my current study on this social dimension corpus base of togetherness,
Arka,
commutative expression. Yep,
Pak Arka, mohon maaf,
yep.
mungkin lagi 7
3
to
menit.
10 minutes, 5 menit atau
Okay,
10 menit
we are
ya,
almost close. Okay,
ya.
okay, good. Okay, so very interesting finding there. So another thing that I want to go through very quickly is the idea related to that social inclusion is the symbolic meaning. Going back to the idea of the socials. Okay, I just want to remind you about this one because as soon as you learn linguistic, you learn this person's idea, this great idea of the idea of discrete property of linguistic science. Okay, the system. Linguistic science is a discrete, but at the same time, the idea of the fuzzy boundaries of reality. Okay, so the idea is, a science, linguistic science, is that it's discrete psychologically, but in reality, you are bombarded with physical uh, realities that may fuzzy. But then, because you have this discrete mental representation, so you can still see the categories clearly, even though physically in the empirical world, you have partial things, just like this one. So you can still, if I put this partially, you can still read and you can still understand. This is perhaps you can guess this is letters because your cognitive ability, linguistic science is stored in your mind as something discrete. Even though physically you see something that is partial, you can still see it's, discrete. Okay, so that's the basic idea, and see how that is implemented in the social togetherness idea of a commutative meaning. Okay, so what I've done is to look at the a larger context of multilingualism and multiculturalism, the idea of group entities. Because when you talk about in group or out group, you talk about more than simply language. Okay, you talk about, but language is central. Okay, so you talk about language being used in code switching, for example. You switch from one language to another to express your group identity. Okay, so you have in group or out group, and this is associated with multiculturalism, multilingualism. Wijaya, a historian from Udayana University, and me, so we
Pak, kayaknya suaranya hilang deh, Pak. Belum kedengeran, Pak. Mungkin ada ketekan tombol apa gitu nggak sengaja tadi waktu pindahin slide-nya.
Pak Dede.
Bagaimana Pak PD1?
Saya kira Pak Arka nggak dengar ucapan Pak Ide, bisa di teks langsung atau mungkin di chat saja. Sorry.
Yap.
SMS saja lewat WA.
Oke, Prof. Sekarang saya lakukan. Suksema.
Can you hear me?
Ya, sudah kembali Pak. Good. Sudah.
Okay, disconnect my wireless. I think the wireless is a bit issue. Okay, good.
Okay, good. Sudah bagus.
Ya, makasih Pak.
Okay, good. Sorry, the technology. So very quickly, so I did a study. This is a paper already sent to a journal. So I'm expecting review at the moment. Hopefully it's okay. So the basic idea is to look at the debate on relationship between multiculturalism and multilingualism, and we look at the minority Japanese migrant groups in Sumatera village. Okay. So we look at the precise interconnection between multiculturalism and multilingualism is not made explicit in the literature, so we investigate that one. So the idea is, the small minority group in the Sumatra village wanna be part of that village, so we talk about multiculturalism. So the basic finding is that the Sumatra village is culturally rural community. They have cultural and linguistic engagement as just symbolic in it. Okay, and multilingualism is an indicator of multiculturalism. So the finding is that they use Balinese code switching by the Japanese migrants to show their kind of in-group signaling in-group communication with the majority of Balinese, and also beyond linguistic, engagement, you see cultural engagement. For example, Pecalang provides security for Islamic events. But of course, then at the larger group, Indonesian is used as formal intergroup meetings. Okay, so we see the space of interrelation between multiculturalism and multilingualism. So you have multilingualism on one hand, you have multiculturalism, and you have this space. Basically, the community in Sumatra is actually multilingual, but it's not yet multicultural. Okay, because multicultural, you have to engage, fully deeply in multicultural intergroup communication. This is an issue. It's not possible, at least in the current context of Indonesian setting. Another thing, this is the one that I just mentioned, a deep engagement may not be possible for cultural religious reasons. Okay, a member of a Japanese minority who are, those people usually Muslims, they cannot deeply engage culturally with the Balinese because of religious reasons. But in linguistic terms, they may have high competence in Balinese and so Balinese as as an indication of being part in group communication. So this is the issue of multilingualism and multiculturalism, to what extent they interact with one another. Another thing is just briefly the last slide. I think this is to look at the partial. Remember that I talk about the Saussurean's idea of sign as discrete category at your cognitive level, but in reality you can do it partially. So we talk about this socio-cultural political identity in contemporary Indonesia and making use, exploiting these linguistic resources and cultural resources like Balinese identity. So Balinese identity, you can just, parcel it using, for example, the Desta as your identity. But that only partially, but also discreetly you show your identity affiliation at one point. But this is for socio-political cultural vision. You can use it for cultural resources. So Papuan identity, for example, Jokowi, I just use Jokowi here because I have more pictures on Jokowi. So he used, for example, this accessories as the Papuan identity. So the basic idea is that you have complex interrelation between multilingualism, where you have linguistic resources at different levels. Internally within language, you have resources in morphology, syntax, and you have this construction to express meaning associated with togetherness. Beyond that one, in the current context of Indonesian diglossic multilingual situation, you have different languages, and languages may symbolically use to show your affiliation in terms of social grouping. Okay, but they are all partial, okay, and culturally symbolic and partial in nature. But the heart of this, at the bottom line of this, is the idea of being together. The meaning of togetherness, commutative meaning, across different layers of structures, internally within the system and also outside the system. Okay, so that's the basic, the take-home point I think I want to say. And just briefly, the conclusion. So you have commutative togetherness, expression, and the socio-cultural political linguistic significance of this. Okay. I've done my work and I'm still working on this and collecting more data. So we need in-depth investigation to find out how such meanings. I talk about meanings, commutative meanings, togetherness meaning in a larger context in Indonesian. We need to do more on that. Okay. So I mentioned a bit about socio-cultural political context, for example, like the pictures from the COWI, how linguistic and cultural resources are used in this political inclusion, social inclusion, or exclusion. Okay? You can use resources from linguistic resources and socio-cultural other resources for this togetherness, or also excluding other people from your group. It's very powerful tool in language, you can see. And there's an area that is still understudied, how linguistic system are connected to the outer context. Okay, thank you. Feedback.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Arka. Dan ada beberapa pertanyaan Pak di chat. Mungkin kita mulai dari situ dulu. Sebentar, ada yang beri komentar juga di chat.
So can you guide me which one first?
Ya, ya. Nah, ada dari Ibu Prof. Suciati Brata bertanya, sebentar Pak. Pertanyaannya, mohon maaf Bapak Ibu kalau ada yang terlewat juga pertanyaan dari Bapak Ibu. Nanti saya akan trace lagi chat terkait pertanyaan itu. Nah, Ibu Prof bertanya, ada dua kalimat, tolong ambil saya kursi, versus tolong ambilkan saya satu kursi. What are then the differences? It is possible to say that the meaning of the sentence with number means assertive, specific. Jadi apakah mungkin arti dari kedua kalimat itu dengan adanya number seperti ambilkan saya satu kursi itu lebih asertif dan spesifik?
Lebih spesifik, asertif dari yang dua, begitu.
Yang pertama kan tolong ambil saya kursi tanpa ada number di kursinya. Kemudian yang kedua tolong ambilkan saya satu kursi. Nah pertanyaannya perbedaannya apa? Kemudian apakah mungkin kalimat yang ada numbernya itu satu kursi itu lebih asertif dan spesifik?
Ya, saya pikir lebih spesifik ya. So using, I think, there are two things here. One is number in terms of the nama, and also numeral. There are two things here. So numeral like dua, tiga, satu, dua, tiga. They are numeral in categories, making the number more specific. Okay. So, but we are here talking about number as a category. They are related, but definitely when you have more specific information with numeral, then you have more specific nama, like marking, like you have morphology expressing the jewel, for example. It's more specific of number system. Okay. Yes, there is an issue of one is the issue of specificity, of course, but then assertiveness and social meaning associated with particular number. That is another issue that needs to be checked and have evidence whether the difference would be significant. For example, let's say it has implicational social meaning that is of cultural significance. I don't know, but specificity, yes, but I'm interested in the larger implicational aspect in terms of social significance. Okay. But that's the question that needs to be studied, investigated, I think, either on the basis of corpus-based study that we presented here briefly, or we can check using a kind of experimental one. That's another, line of future research.
Okay.
Interesting. Thank you.
Ya.
Bang deh yang satu lagi yang berisi magibong itu, have a look at the chat.
Oh ya.
To show togetherness.
Oh, ya.
Itu lagi
Oh,
satu.
Ya, Bu Prof. Ya, Pak, satu lagi. In Balinese we have prefix ma to indicate togetherness. / participants for more than one. Misalnya meprani, megibung.
Yep.
Kemudian in Indonesian language we have berjamaah.
Yep.
Dan this is determined by Desa Kalapatra. Jadi mungkin tuh komentar mungkin dari ibunya maksudnya.
Komentar saya, one is the Indonesian ber and ma in a way related. They are historically related, so they are middle markers. So actually now we have Arin in the audience. So my student that I am supervising now at ANU, she is from UI, looking at middle construction across Austronesian languages, including Balinese ma and Indonesian ber and other markers in Austronesian world Indonesia. So the basic idea, you have this historical, that's another thing. But yes, so you have this middle meaning, you have this plurality, togetherness. So middle is a complex, it's a category with complex meaning, including one is the plural meaning and plurality in the sense of togetherness, because you have like it should be together. If you say dia bertemu, it means that the person dia and the person that the two person together. You cannot say bertemu from the distance, for example, or at different place. Okay, like in Magibung, for example, in Balinese, you have to be at the same time. Yoman Magibung itu, and then even though you do not say anything, there is it's understood associate meaning, plurality. Oke,
terima kasih Pak. Kemudian ada satu ini mungkin komentar dari Ibu Kamsinah. Ibunya bilang in Bugis we have suffix ta to indicate togetherness, but it is also used to perform politeness. Komentar mungkin tambahan data yang menarik.
Yeah, it's interesting cross linguistically. This is the if you read in literature on polite plural. Okay, like Indonesian, I was in Jungpana in Makassar. I did my master at Hasanuddin. I was surprised at the beginning when the soccer told me, "Kita turun di mana?" Meaning kita is the polite plural of you. Okay, so I was surprised when I heard, hey, okay, ini software-nya ikut turun nih, kita turun di mana? But it's just you, singular plural. So you have this polite plural. Probably kita ta, I think ta from kita, I don't know. But it's not only in colloquial, ujung pandang Indonesian, but it's common across languages across the Austronesian world to the Pacific. You have the plural expressions to express politeness. And even kami, when you say when you mean I, kami kami, the form is plural, but then the reference, the index in each word is singular. So polite plural is common across languages, so there is a connection between plurality and polite. It's not surprising. But thank you for the comment and data put.
Baik, terima kasih. Kemudian kita masih ada waktu Pak, lagi 13 menit.
Oh, bisa waktu.
Sampai 12.30 kan stopnya. Jadi ada pertanyaan dari selanjutnya, saya masuk ke pertanyaan Bapak Made Netra. Bapaknya menyebutkan in Balinese, plurality and togetherness are frequently expressed with the singular pronoun tiang, titiang, followed with lexical pada as in titiang pada sumanggam. We all agree. Dalam kurung itu maksudnya, titiang pada sumanggam, we all agree. Kemudian pertanyaannya, can we say that this is just the form of commutative meaning of plurality and togetherness? Pemakaian titiang sebagai di dalam kalimat titiang pada sumanggam. Yeah.
Yes, it's interesting. So pada, and not only in Indonesian, pada is Austronesian. It's an old form, and you can have pada in other. It's so two things here. One is the pronominal in Balinese, tiang, tiang, icang. Pronouns are all singular. Okay, at least the contemporary Balinese. We lost already the kami of kita in the old Austronesian. So the pronoun is singular, and then the verb like pada, that you have this inclusory there. So you have the plurality on the predicate, and you have singular, and then that's why you have the singular semantic morphosyntactic morphosemantic number. You have just using the syntax with subject singular and the verb with morphology plural, then you include this plurality with associative meaning. And then you can, of course, make it explicitly commutative, aja or sarang at after the verb as an oblique marker. Yes,
Okay.
that's the answer.
Baik, terima kasih. Kemudian saya lanjut. Lumayan nih Pak, banyak pertanyaan. Selanjutnya dari Prof. Putrayatnya, noun phrase conjunction reflects additive, inclusory, and commutative strategies. Titik. Kemudian, in the context of Indonesian, are there any syntactic constraint and semantic properties of inclusory constructions?
You have the coordination. Coordination in Marori, in languages like Marori, you have coordination where they coordinate the marker like dan and with. Using this. This language uses the same marker. In Indonesian, you use two things here. You have dan, ali, dan tono. So you have coordination. It's basically coordination, and then coordination also create plurality. Okay, saya dan tono makan. Okay, but then in Indonesian you have also dengan. Okay, but dengan is a preposition. So you have this because it's a preposition. It's not a coordination. You can have more a floating syntactic occurrence of dengan. Ya dengan Ali makan. Ya makan dengan Ali. Okay. Ya dan Ali makan. Ya makan dan ali. You cannot say that. So you expect the different syntactic behavior because of the grammatical category of the same meaning expressed by different categories. One is the coordination, the other is a preposition. So, but the meaning, at deeper level, you see, and this is true in other languages, the same meaning can be expressed by different syntactic categories. Once you have different syntactic categories, then you expect different syntactic distribution. Okay, so it's, you see, but in other languages, there is no distinction between dan and with. Just one form. Yes, you expect that. So that's my answer.
I have a question. If you still have time.
Sebentar, mohon maaf. Oh, Pak Arka, masih ada.
If you still have time, I have question for Pak Arka.
Okay.
But I didn't write down my questions on the chat sessions there. I'm okay. I can wait. Go ahead. I can wait. I can wait. I'll be the last one.
Ya, oke. Baik. Saya maunya baca lanjut yang di chat dulu.
Ya, Dede, extend the time.
Ya, boleh, boleh.
Go ahead.
Boleh,
I'll be fine. Go ahead with Pak Udayana.
Ya, oke. Sekarang ini dari Pak Sena, tapi nanyanya ke saya sebenarnya. I would like to ask further explanation. Mungkin Pak bisa bantu jawab juga, Pak.
Ya.
On example of diajak.
Ya.
Ini pertanyaan Pak Sena. I would like to ask for further explanation on an example of diajak, since I'm currently trying to figure out passive voice. Psychologically and semantically, would there be any meaning of I don't really want to, but I am diajak, and similar example of that? My apologies for the silly question. Thank you. Would there be, the question is psychologically and semantically, would there be any meaning of I don't really want to, but I am diajak?
It is in passive. Is it in passive?
Yeah.
Look.
Pertanyaannya yang diajak tadi itu.
Yeah, when you investigate ajak, and then when you add another layer of active and passive, you have two things here already. All right, and then another thing is the meaning, whether or not something that you whether that meaning unwillingness is associated with the passive or not. It's a tricky question, but we know that, for example, there's something that you didn't want happen morphologically well studied, like kehujanan, kejatuhan, or whatever, that is adversary, yang tidak diinginkan, okay? But passive is very general. But then you have morphology like terkena, that could be, but with D is in opposition with ter in Indonesian. Ter is something that is already happening, but it could imply that meaning. But the question of whether you have this unintended meaning and associated with passive, if something is not easy to find out, and you have to check with having corpus-based collocational study is one way of sorting out that and see the distribution. Okay, but I don't know the answer on the top of my head.
Oke, terima kasih Pak. Selanjutnya, pertanyaan dari Ibu Yana. How to accommodate saling within the commutative/inclusory perspective?
Saling is let me think. Okay, saling carries basically reciprocal meaning. Reciprocal is the plural meaning. So when you have reciprocal, you have plural meaning. But it doesn't. It definitely says something about plurality and reciprocality, and it is an adverbial. Okay, so it has some kind of. If you think about inclusory, so saling could be a marker of inclusory. Okay, because you cannot just say dia saling cium without thinking about a group at least two. Okay. You cannot say saya saling cium sendiri. You can't say that. Saling encodes a group. If you link up, but then the meaning of saling is more complex than that, of course. Okay, depending on it could take in turn, position with the mark of ber, ya saling cium, ya perciuman. Saling cium mean take turn. Okay? If you do it together at the same time, you cannot say saling. That's but ber is a middle marker carrying this good meaning. Saling also carrying inclusory meaning, but then there is a subsense meaning. There is a subsense. There are subsenses of that plurality that may be. Okay.
Baik, terima kasih. Selanjutnya dari Pak Nyoman Udayana. Saya baca nih Pak ya.
Yeah.
My question, kemudian I'm interested in knowing more about the ber construction in Indonesian related to commutative participant and its relationship in the Marori counterpart. In bahasa Indonesia, a sentence such as saya berjalan dengan John. Sebentar, saya berjalan dengan John. Maaf tadi ada yang ngechat, jadi saya harus balik lagi ke atas. Okay, in bahasa Indonesia, sentence such as saya berjalan dengan John is clearly monadic because if you walk, you don't have to do that commutatively. But what happens to Marori because the language has dual coding on the verb? Does the sentence counterpart in Marori, is it counted as diadik? That's what I can read from the chat, Pak.
Kalau bahasa Indonesia diadik, saya berjalan dengan
John is clearly monadic disebutkan. Because if you walk, you don't have to do that commutatively. But what happens to Marori?
Dia berjalan dengan John. Why is it not commutative in a way? Why? Can you say ia berjalan dengan John and proximity John itu di Denpasar?
No. I mean like this, because berjalan lexical semantically, it is only you don't have to have a company. You can berjalan by yourself, with yourself.
Yeah, but dengan John you have add.
Yeah. So if that is with the, let's say, participant or valence, dia berjalan dengan John. Berjalan is counted as one participant, as a monovalent, for example, because it is dengan, then it is a kind of let's say berkelahi, yes, but berkelahi you need to fight somebody to fight with.
I see your point.
Yeah. Okay.
I see. Okay, look, one is ber. Ber is not necessarily expressing. I think you have to read. I think Arin is now investigating ber, and we know ber and ma also. So it's multifunctional, marker. So it's not necessarily expressing plural. So that's why.
Yeah.
You can say saya berjalan. So middle marker is not.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So once you have that one, and then the plurality is added by the marker that ia berjalan dengan John. So ber is multifunctional in that case. Of course, ia berjalan, ber doesn't say anything. Plurality in that particular group, berjalan. It doesn't say anything plural. Only plurality is added by additional marking like dengan commutative marking. That's why you have to. But the root when you have pupil, but the plurality is not necessarily created by the equivalence. This is the idea of, the marking, the root, the idea of plural meaning expressed not by only one particular form, to be part of the root and part of the equivalence. In Marori, you have the agreement, let's say that the indexing morphology dual was whatever, it explicitly included in the parts. Ber does not. It's quite different, even though you may have similarity, but it's quite different.
So then in Marori it is divalent then. dia berjalan dengan John in Maruri.
What do you mean by divalent?
Two participant, because you are commutative, like berkelahi in bahasa Indonesia.
Not necessarily. When you have jalan, because the route walk must have particular morphology agreement. The subject is number, so it's quite different depending on the agreement. You can have jalan, and then the morphology, the subject is singular or plural, like in English in a way, but not exactly the same, right? So syntactically, it's transitivity. So valency is at different layers. You can talk about semantic valency, like berjalan, okay, so as a monovalent. But then you do not have positivization in Maruri. So at the level of semantic argument, you can talk about monovalent. But we are talking about a deeper semantics. You can have plural events with monovalence. Okay, so mereka berjalan. It's a monovalent. You have one participant in terms of argument, but then the event of walking, into the semantics of walking, you have plural participants. So you have because monovalent predicate semantically at the level of semantic argument structure, but at the level of event structure, you talk about plurality of events. Because everybody, when kita berjalan, it means that everybody walks. So you have plural events of walking. And in languages that carry the so-called verbal number, you should have verbal root, plural verbal root, like sitting. If you sit, mereka duduk dengan John duduk, in languages like Marori, you have the plural verbal root, because sitting should be plural in the end. But in terms of the argument structure, you have monovalent one place predicate.
Oh, still it is monovalent even in Maruri.
Yeah. So you're talking about two things here.
Okay, thank you.
You're talking about monovalency or divalency, argument structure, semantic argument structure, and semantics of plurality.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.
I think I can ask a questions now, Pak Dede.
Ya,
I hope so.
Satu lagi, maaf Pak, satu lagi habis itu beda satu, habis itu mungkin kalau nggak ada yang lagi nanya, mungkin kita hari. Maaf Pak ya, satu masih ada.
Go ahead, ya.
Ada yang tanya satu lagi Pak Arka, sebelum kita ke Pak Weda satu, itu dari Karlina. Dia nanya, is aja only a sample? Apakah kita melihat hanya kata ajak? Meaning that, have you consider other words to support the cultural conclusion about togetherness? As we might have serta to express another togetherness. Atau mungkin the other direction, we have cerai and pisah. Have you probably considered these other words, collocation, khususnya serta, cerai, dan pisah, that might be relevant to your analysis?
Yeah, the answer is big yes. The answer is big yes. Actually, I asked Dede to give me more data on sama, for example, bersama. So the root sama, how that will play out. Okay, and also I think further research should look at the opposite side of the equation. Okay, the social inclusion. So I've been talking about socio-cultural inclusion, but at the same time, linguistic and socio-cultural resources, very often used by people for social exclusion, even though this is something negative. Okay. But in real life, you see the two, social inclusion and social exclusion, go together, and actually they complementary in a way and manipulable. Yes, the answer is big yes, but I don't have time yet. Many things.
Baik, terima kasih. Silakan Bapak satu Pak Nyamana Wibawa untuk bertanya.
Thanks Pak Dede.
Ya,
ya. Nah, apa-apa. Panggil saya Ari aja. Alright, Pak. For me, this is a very interesting topic. It is interesting for the sake of the topic itself about the commutative. But what makes it more interesting for me is because Prof. Arka puts it from socio-cultural perspective, and then he brings up some corpus evidence That is for me a very comprehensive approach, and I give a huge credit for that one, Prof. Arka. So I have a questions. To the best of my knowledge, commutative case or marker, whatever you call it, it could be confusing with, let's say, instrumental or what is it, associative case. And then the question that I have is, based on, I think, 5 different languages that you are looking at, is there any test that you can tell us that commutative case is, clearly separated from instrumental case or associative case in those 5 languages? That is my first question. I have the other 2 questions, and then I can go ahead with the other 2 questions when you're done with the first questions, Prof. Arka.
Well, I think it's one thing is, case marking, instrumental, commutative, even, in languages like Indonesian, which does not have case, but you do have prepositional,
right,
marker used in the same way as case, and you see immediately like sama or benar. Colloquial Indonesian, saya datang sama ibu, diundang sama ibu, ciuman sama, and then dengan, for example, you have dengan as instrumental, dengan ali, dengan palu, memukul dia dengan palu, memukul dia dengan menembak dia dengan apa begitu. Jadi dengan itself is multifunction. So I think it's not unique to Indonesian, and in many other languages, you have a small set of case marking, a semantic case. We call it semantic case, as opposed to grammatical case like accusative, ergative, when express grammatical relations like subject object. But this is peripheral case marking, like instrumental, commutative. They are more peripheral. So the question is, how would you then distinguish when you have multifunctional case marker, okay, from set of other methods? Usually people use tests like using the head. So collocational, again, this is if you want to test with the collocational analysis, because case marking, when they mark a flag case, it depends. This is called dependent marking. So you mark a particular semantic relation in relation to that. You expect that there are restrictions. So I think the test should be different types of verb classes or predicate classes by which a particular case marking can be. But I haven't done it. But I think it's something that you have to do on the basis of what you know about the language.
Right. Excellent, Prof. Yeah, the reason why I'm asking that one is I've read an article about Russian language. I mean, that is about the commutative case in Russian. So Russian has, very nice, ways of, separating associative, instrumental and commutative. All right. So the next question is, in terms of animacy. So animacy is very interesting in commutative, topics, issues. So you might happen to know about animacy in these 5 different languages, because between a certain language makes a difference between a companion and companion. One language could include animate and inanimate, companion and companion, but some other language they don't, they can use both, categories of animacy. Yeah. So
there's a restriction on that, and I think from my experience in, for example, the language that I'm working on, so you have commutative meaning can be extended to non-animate being. Commutative, as I mentioned, commutative togetherness, it's more than simply being together. It has senses like, proximity, ability to co-control the event. When you say mereka berciuman, so dia berciuman dengan Ali also has the control of cium. Okay, so it has some you have this inclusory as a group meaning, and then also the participation. co-participation, kind of more symmetrical in a way. So that's why you require animacy, but that depends on the root, the predicate. When you talk about kissing, you talk about whatever that requires animacy. Do not expect, for example, a wall kiss each other because the word kissing also requires animacy coming inherently from the predicate. Okay? But in fact, there is variation. In Maori, it's possible to have this inclusory meaning with within any meaning. What happens in Maori is you have a verb like carry, the verb carry like K. The verb is K. Okay, the verb is K. So K is plural. You have this plural fractionality verbal number. You have a difference between singular group and what is possible in this language? You can say something, saya K membawa dia, saya membawa plural, and then you have a singular object. You can say the verb is plural, inclusory, and then it would mean I carried one coconut and other things, a collective of something. But I'm interested in just coconut. So saya bawa coconut, saya bawa saya membawa kelapa dan yang lain-lain. Tapi kelapa menjadi salient. So this is another aspect of commutative meaning. When commutative inclusory meaning, you are interested in one focal point of the plural. You just highlight one, but then you imply other things. Okay? Usually, this is culturally what comes together with
That's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, so
that's interesting. Yeah,
it's something that it's not widely. You carry coconut and other things that usually people carry. You cannot say that saya membawa plural kemudian coconut satu, kelapa satu. It doesn't mean saya membawa kelapa satu dan rumahnya yang lain-lain totally different, rumahnya sesuatu obat nyamuk. Biasanya menggunakan dengan alat-alat lain secara tradisional. Collectively something proximity associated with culturally understood collection set. This is other aspects of collective part of this.
Excellent, thank you. So the last one is I'm from an experimental perspective. So if you have what is that?
Saya cuma biar saya nggak lupa ini.
Okay.
Pak Arka yang nanya apakah bahannya bisa di-share nggak slide-nya itu? Ada beberapa yang bertanya apakah slides-nya Bapak bisa dibagikan ke peserta. Mungkin nanti via email yang datang di sini.
Okay, certainly this is ongoing research. It's a bit tricky, but I think people already know that. In a way, I'm okay with that. So send me an email because this is ongoing and still developing, and I'm happy to share.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shall I continue? Yeah. All right. Thank you, Pak Dede. Okay. So now I'm from I'm an experimental person actually. So I'm very interested in looking at the commutative in these 5 languages, Prof. Arka. So you have a slide just now. The slide showing the typology of each language. Because one language belongs to a certain typology, right? So now what I'm thinking from experimental perspective is if we have a stimuli in English, for example, and then we show that stimuli to every speaker of this language, different languages, and then I'd love to see how they're gonna respond the stimuli, right? Because of course the stimuli is something has to do with the commutative, issues there. This is a very basic, introductory idea, and then we show them the stimuli, computer-based stimuli, and then see how they respond. If the case in Maori or what is it, Dewey or other languages, how they respond to that stimuli. And of course, we have the stimuli in English, and then we need to translate that stimuli into each language. Then how they're gonna respond? If every language has a certain case, specific case for commutative, and then we'd love to see how the speakers of that language respond to that stimuli. But I mean, this is not a question, but I'd love to see. So that's why I'm saying it's very interested to administer experimental study on commutative. That's it. Thank you so much.
It's interesting, but an area experimental. I think one area that I'm very keen is to sort out the senses associated with different expressions. So the relationship between, to what extent a language different from other internal linguistic resources, and the senses. You have this. We talk about the plurality, the meaning, to what extent proximity categories. In linguistic, categories are very important. You have this semantic field, the classification, where the animacy is one thing. So testing animacy, and to what extent animacy related to categories, like whether when you have community, to what extent animacy may constrain or may not be part of the constraint related to sense of a joint event, a separate event.
Right.
That's one thing still, but interesting stuff is more on the socio-cultural side, because we see how these senses are exploited by
the socio-cultural background,
socio-cultural aspect.
Excellent, excellent,
So you see how these linguistic resources in one language, or socio-linguistic resources in a given area like Balinese or Indonesian. You have this multilingual setting, you have this languages with different stratification, diagnosis situation, and also group identities play out, and to what extent people may use this in terms of socio-cultural communication, or even within the group, like among the Balinese. So this is the area of sociolinguistics that, and also ethnolinguistics, do more research on. So I'm very keen among the audience. I don't know who the audience are here, but if you are interested in doing your own research related to my current research, so let me know. We can work together. I want to compare across Indonesia. You have different settings. In Bali, you have the predominantly area with Hindu Balinese, and in other areas you have Muslims, in other areas you have Christian, and you have linguistic resources, and how this play out in terms of this great question of being together, which has a very
excellent talk, Prof. Arka. Thank you so much, Pak Dede. Yep.
Baik, terima kasih. Mungkin
one more question.
Siapa lagi bertanya?
Saya lagi coba nama Pak Arko. Okay, Pak Arko. No, I just would like to have clarity again on valency, on argument. For example, in bahasa Indonesia you have mereka berkelahi, it's okay. Mereka berkelahi, it's okay. But then now, if you say saya berkelahi, you cannot have that sentence. It's not well formed, right? But if then you have saya berkelahi dengan dia, so you have commutative now. So is there a change in valence now within the two? Mereka berkelahi, it is self-explanatory because there's let's say both the agent and the theme is coded in the subject. Mereka berkelahi is alright, right? But then now with mereka, dia berkelahi, you cannot have that. So unless you have commutative. So in other words, then
two questions. Two answers, man. One is acceptability varies among speakers. I think it's well accepted now. Acceptability, you have to look at as empirically by one experimental one, two looking at your corpus. But related to that, the second one is acceptability is a matter of degree. So you expect that this kind of thing, on one hand, you have berkelahi, where you in a kelahi requires plural participants. And then when subject is singular, your language consultant might accept that one, but implying that there is another participant, implicit one. That's why I talk about implicit associative. I think this is the thing that we talk about the Caesarean signs. Okay, so there is, empirical language out there. It's fuzzy, it's messy. So grammarian linguists theoretical linguists usually like to talk about discrete categories, but languages out there, the empirical point is very messy.
Yeah.
What you claim as not acceptable might be acceptable by other people. So it depends on
exactly.
a lot of factors. Okay. But back to your question, whether it's one monovalent or not, this is again, when you go deeper to the level of semantic, then you may accept it's yes, it's monolevel in both. Okay.
Yeah, because it reminds me of the Greek discontinuous reciprocal. So if you say mereka berkelahi as accepted in the language, but then dia berkelahi dengan mereka, for example, so you have commutative and it is counted as an argument.
Argument or not is again, it's fuzzy depending on the level of whether you talk about syntactic argument or not.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, my guru of syntax. Thank you very much.
Baik Bapak Ibu, terima kasih. Selanjutnya saya ingin beri kesempatan untuk Bapak Koprodi mungkin sepatah dua patah kata, Prof, sekaligus menutup kegiatan pertama kita siang ini. Silakan.
Baik, terima kasih. Pertama-tama saya ucapkan maaf dulu karena masalah teknis tadi saya tidak bisa hadir pada awal pertemuan ini. Terima kasih saya ucapkan kepada Pak Prof. Wayan Arka dan Pak Dede yang telah melaksanakan kegiatan ini dengan bagus. Terus kepada para Bapak Ibu peserta, kalau saya lihat dari daftar hadir, ini dari Padang sampai ke Kupang ini Pak ya. Di Kupang ada Bapak Jeremy Baluk, yang dari Padang ada banyak sekali, ada Profesor Juprisal, ada Ibu Ike Revita Unad. Dari Unad, selamat siang semuanya. Jadi, perlu saya sampaikan bahwa ini adalah pertemuan yang pertama. Ide ini hadir karena work from home-nya terlalu lama dan kita tidak bisa ketemu pada pertemuan-pertemuan yang semestinya ada dan dibatalkan. Jadi ide untuk pertemuan pertama ini datang pada guru kami, Profesor Wayan Arka, karena satu-satunya yang mendunia. Ya, maka pilihan pertama jatuh pada Pak Wayan Arka. Terus pada pertemuan-pertemuan berikut kami akan merancang, mendiskusikan dan mencari suatu topik yang bisa dihadirkan dalam pertemuan-pertemuan selanjutnya. Jadi terima kasih saya ucapkan kepada para peserta yang sudah dari jauh nih ya, tapi bukan dari gambar saja. Untuk selanjutnya kami akan runding dulu apakah pertemuan ini akan dilakukan sebulan sekali atau 2 minggu sekali. Demikian yang saya bisa sampaikan. Terima kasih kembali lagi. Dan saya harap Bapak Gede menutup acara ini. Terima kasih.
Can I say something? Jadi sebelum ditutup, lagi sekali saya mengucapkan terima kasih atas kehadiran semuanya. Dan seperti saya bilang tadi, this is an ongoing research and I'm very keen to do more and get feedback and want to collaborate with any of you across Indonesia who want to do anything on commutative-inclusory research from language internal system to cultural, social-cultural, political aspect of it in combination with both. So if you want to do something on this, please let me know and we can share and learn together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Baik, terima kasih. Kita akhiri pertemuan kali ini dan syukurnya sudah live stream di YouTube, jadi record di YouTube. pertemuan kali ini. Jadi Bapak Ibu bisa bolak-balik ke YouTube untuk ngecek kalau ada yang terlewat tadinya. Ya, baik, terima kasih Pak Arka, terima kasih waktunya, dan Bapak Ibu teman-teman semua terima kasih juga sudah hadir. Sampai bertemu lagi.
Salam, take care, salam dari Canberra. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you. Salam dari Jayapura. Jayapura biasa.
Salam Pak semuanya. Oke.
Salam sehat semua.
Terima kasih